Hi, this is Ryan Kingsline. In this tutorial we're going to take a look at how to make tileable textures inside of ZBrush, as well as their bump map and, if necessary, a normal map. First, let's take a look at an image that makes a lot of use of tileable textures. The ground floor is a tileable texture that you're going to see made inside this tutorial. Along the wall are two tileable textures. The bricks along the center are from the Gnomon Bricks and Blocks texture DVD, and the concrete along the wall is from absolutetextures.com, and it's one of their free samples. This image was modeled, textured, and rendered entirely in ZBrush. To create a tileable image inside of ZBrush, we're going to use the canvas to do all of our modeling. So the first step that we've got to do is import the texture into ZBrush. We just go to the texture palette, click import, navigate to where the file is, and hit enter. The next step is that we've got to go to the texture palette and press crop and fill. Crop and fill will expand and fill the canvas with the texture. Next, we're going to make the canvas a square canvas to make it easier for us to use the tileable map later on. To do that, we go to the document palette, turn Pro off, choose the smallest dimension. In this case, it's the height at 1536. And then we'll put that number into the width column and then click crop. Note that we're not clicking resize because we don't actually want to adjust anything inside the canvas. We actually just want to crop it. Alright, once we've done that, we can press the tilde key and click and drag on the canvas to tile the canvas around. We're going to offset this so that the edges of the layers are basically in the center. Once they're there, we're going to select the clone brush from the tool palette. Go to the tool palette and into the modifiers, you're going to turn retain center off. We're going to select RGB and make sure that Z-add is off. And then just press Control. Click on any part of the canvas that you want to use as the source, and then click and paint that area onto another area. In this case, we're fixing up areas for where the bricks don't necessarily line up. Alright, once you're done with that, we're just going to check it and just tile this around to see if we've missed anything. Traditionally, the way to create a tileable texture with a bump map is to duplicate the color layer, desaturate it, use the levels to adjust it so that the high points are more white and the low points are darker. There are a couple of problems with this. The most important problem is that the photo reference that you're using is by no means an exact indicator of depth. So a lot of cleanup sometimes has to happen. The approach that I'm going to show you today is going to give you a high level of fidelity as well as the exact duplicate of the texture map. We're going to do this by using the canvas as a modeling tool. The first step in this is to create a brick that we'll use as the base model for all the bricks. So we go to the tool palette, we select a cube 3D, we go into their initialize settings. We're going to set the X size to somewhere around 60, the Y size to somewhere around 20, and then we'll divide it once to round off the edges. Next, we'll go back to the layer palette, and previously we had turned off the layer with the photo reference in it so that we could just be modeling freely inside the canvas. So we'll go up to the top and click it twice until the orange rectangle is visible at the top. And then click the second layer, or if there isn't a second layer, just press create in the layer palette. You want to be doing all of your modeling in a separate layer. It's also a really good idea to go to the picker palette and set the Z intensity to -2. What the picker palette does is it determines where the pixel, or in this case the 3D object, will be drawn or how it's going to take that information. If the Z intensity is set to 0, then it will sample whatever pixel is underneath the cursor and use the depth of that pixel. If you set it to an exact number, like in this case -2, then it will always draw at -2. This is very helpful when doing canvas modeling because then you're sure that all of the drawing that you do happens at a specific depth and you don't actually end up with one brick that's way back in space or too far forward in space. Now, with the photo reference visible in the background, we're going to make sure that we're in the second layer and then we draw the brick onto the canvas. Go into edit mode and rotate the brick around so that it's positioned for one of the bricks in the image. At this point, I usually turn mirroring on so that any of the sculpting that I do will happen to both the front and the back. So for this brick, I've got Y symmetry active. Now press move on the shelf and then adjust the shape of this brick to fit the photo reference. It doesn't have to be perfect, just as close as you can get. Once you have that one brick the way that you want, then you'll go to the far right column and press the little camera icon at the bottom. That's a snapshot. You can also press Shift S for the hotkey. What that does is it drops one version of that brick to canvas so that you've got pixels that fill up the shape. Now, these are pixels, so they have depth information, they have color information, orientation, and they'll house material as well. But what we need is just a physical representation of the depth. So once we have snapshot one brick to the canvas, we'll move the live editable brick off to another area, adjust its shape, and then press snapshot again. And then continue this process until we have all the bricks that are in the center area. Note that we're staying away from the edges. Once we've got all the bricks that are in the center area, then we'll go up to the layer palette and we'll offset each of these layers so that we can get the bricks around the edge. To do that, you go up to Layer Palette, you select Displace H, type in a number that is roughly half the document's width, and then press Enter. Make sure that you go to the other layer and do that as well. Just make sure you go back to the layer that has your 2.5D brick models so that we can draw some more. So continue drawing bricks until you've filled up everything that's here. Now we're going to create the grout in between the bricks. To do that, we're going to create a whole new layer so that we can use the single layer brush and kind of beat up the grout and treat it separately from the bricks. So we go to the layer palette, we press create, and then press fill or Control F on the keyboard. Now we'll want to make sure that the grout layer is fairly close to the bricks. So in the photo reference, the grout is almost surface level with the bricks themselves. So I go into the layer palette here and go to the displace Z, and I'll just type in -5 a few times and see what happens. If it ever completely surpasses the bricks, then just type in 5 and hit enter and go backwards a bit on the keyboard. Then we go to the tool palette, select the single layer brush, turn on the spray stroke, and set the Z intensity a little low, somewhere around 5 or 10, and then just start damaging that area. And then to get the areas around the edges of the canvas, we're going to have to go up to the layer palette and displace H and displace V for each layer. Or you can use the Z script that I've included with this tutorial. So now we see that we've merged the grout layer with the brick layer, and we've beat up the bricks a little bit with the single layer brush. What we want to do now is clone the texture behind our 2.5D canvas modeling. We're going to select the clone brush. In the tool palette modifiers, we turn off retain center, we turn on layers mode, and then in the shelf we select RGB, make sure Z add is off, set the RGB intensity to 100, and then just draw away. Another really cool thing about 2.5D canvas modeling is using the blur brush. If you select Z add in the shelf and turn RGB off, you can actually blur the depth at the brick's edges where they're meeting the grout. Set the Z intensity somewhere around 50, and then just go around the corners of the bricks to just round them off and merge them with the grout layer. Our next step is to clean up the texture. So there's going to be areas where the bricks that we've modeled don't actually match the photo reference. So to do that, I go back to the clone brush, I turn off layers mode, make sure retain center is off, and I select RGB, make sure Z add is off. Then just press Control to click and select a grout area, and then paint that at the boundaries of the bricks. So when we're ready to get all of this information out, we go to the render palette, turn flat on, then go to the texture palette and say grab dock. And that will grab the color information that we've cloned onto this and put it in the texture palette. We can then export it from there for use either in a 3D package or for our own archives so that we can use it later on in another ZBrush project. Then to grab the 2.5D modeling that we did, we go to the alpha palette and select grab dock. The last thing that I want to show you is how to get a normal map from pure canvas modeling. It's a very simple process using the normal RGB material. Just go to the material palette and select load, then navigate to your program files, the ZBrush 2 directory, and then to Z materials. In there is a material called normal RGB. Select that, hit enter, and in some cases you'll see the material pop up on your canvas right away, or you can just paint it onto your canvas, which is what I'm doing here. I select the simple brush. In the shelf I make sure that M is the only active option. That's M for material, and then I just paint the material onto the canvas. Then just go to the texture palette, select grab dock, and then you've got a normal map, a tileable normal map. Well, that's the end of this tutorial, so thank you very much for watching and happy pixeling.